Hello.
It's hello.
Hello. Hello?
Hello there.
Welcome back to the Space School. Today we'll find out what would have happened had Ahsoka and Obi Wan confronted Anakin on Mustafar. Before we get into this video, special thanks to patrons, voice actors, and everyone else part of my team. Want a chance to win a lightsaber in our next giveaway? Watch to the end of the video, I'll tell you exactly how you can win. Our story begins on Coruscant. Ahsoka had just returned to the planet with the Legion of the 501st. They arrived earlier than they were expected to, but Ahsoka dropped Maul off with Commander Oppo to go into the Jedi Temple, and she was planning on waiting for Anakin, but she decided she would go back into the city for the time being. She said goodbye to the boys in blue. Most of them were still unloading onto the Venator. Ahsoka walked with Rex and Jesse. Rex was assuming control of the 501st again. Appa was being moved down to Rex's old role of captain. Commander Rex, on the other hand, had everything moving in order. There were also a group of clones escorting Maul to the Jedi Temple. Not a ton, about 20 or so clones, with Captain Oppo being one of them. Rex and Ahsoka walked down the ramp of the Venator as they wished Ahsoka well. She was going back into the depths of Coruscant. She believed she would see Anakin again, but from what she understood, he was supposed to be inside the council chambers until further notice, not having any communication with anyone outside of the chambers. So Ahsoka would wait until she could get into communication with him. And, at the moment, she was rather tired. The siege of Mandalore took a lot out of her. She'd been out of the war for months, and the stamina had all dissipated because of her distance from the war effort. Ahsoka walked away with her thoughts on her former master. She planned on talking to him. Maybe in the morning she'd go to the temple and talk to him. Surely nothing could happen between now and then that would prevent her from talking to a perfectly sane Anakin Skywalker. Ahsoka walked down the corridor. Behind her, at the ramp at the Venator, Rex and Jesse stopped. Rex got a hologram from Lord Sidious. The orders were simple: execute Order 66. Sidious also informed Rex that Darth Vader would be there to escort the troops inside the Jedi Temple for victory. Rex understood and prepped all the men. Of course, Rex had a bit of a drawback from this, but with Jesse next to him, it was easier to act on these orders. Jesse sent the orders through the entire 501st comlinks, which included Captain Oppo and the other 19 men that were currently walking inside of the middle of the Jedi Temple. Jedi Master Sindralik and Jocasta Nu, along with 4 temple guards, were meeting Oppo and the clones in the middle of the Great Hall to collect him. As they got there, though, the clones raised their blasters and began to fire. Sindralik was caught off guard as he and the temple guards ignited their lightsabers to defend themselves. Jocasta Nu was clipped in the shoulder as she cried out in pain. The temple guards moved quickly. The issue for the clones is that they were right next to the Jedi when the orders came in, and when they became a threat, as elite as they were, they stood little to no chance of surviving against the temple guards. The temple guards cut down the clones easily, as Maul watched them with shock on his face. He couldn't understand what was happening. Sindralik wasn't going to take any chances though, and so he had the temple guards escort Maul and Jocasta Nu away. At the same time, Master Sindralik was the highest in command at the temple at the moment, and so he sent out a warning across the galaxy to inform the Jedi of what had just happened. For some Jedi, it would give them enough time to escape, but for others, they found themselves much more unlucky. The Jedi Temple was also placed in the high alert. Sindralik, of course, could be overreacting, but if 20 clones all responded to the same order, then what are the chances of this being widespread? And he couldn't go unaccounted for that. Sindralik locked down the entire Jedi Temple and prepared all of its defenses. He had to act fast. He knew the 501st had just returned to Coruscant from Mandalore, and surely their numbers would be doubled. Sindralik was able to get into contact with a couple of Jedi Masters that informed him that because of his actions they were able to narrowly escape death from their clone troopers. Sindralik would feel the change in the Force, and so did the Temple Guards, all of them ready to defend the Jedi Temple. Jocasta Nu got patched up and took a hold of all the students and took them into a hidden location in the temple that only High Council members and Jedi Temple Guards knew about. Skywalker hadn't known of the location yet, because he hadn't been on the Council for long enough. Sindralik looked outside and he could hear the sound of marching. The 501st was coming, and it seemed like this was going to be a siege. When Sindralik looked out of the wall, he saw a robed man walking forward. He assumed it was a Dark Lord of the Sith, but then he came to realize that it was a man named Anakin Skywalker. The clones made their push. They moved around Anakin like a rock in a river as they attacked the front lines of the Jedi Temple. Anakin watched. He didn't realize how well defended the Jedi Temple actually was. When the clones began their assault, it seemed as if it was going to be an easy break, but it wasn't. Anakin and his men couldn't get through. No matter what they did, this defense was placed in when the order first fell during the Old Republic. This defense system was meant to survive an entire planet being besieged. Sindralic was the last in line of great Jedi Masters who knew all the knowledge about the Jedi Temple and its defenses. There was also something so magnificent about this. It was the fact that this defense allowed the Jedi Temple guards to use their lightsabers as weapons. Their lightsabers blocked whatever blaster fire or thermal imploders the clones had back at the clones. The 501st was strong and elite, but they were under their own fire. For Rex and his men, it was like Umbara all over again. They became their very own enemies. Anakin told all the men to stop firing and to begin to hold down the line, making sure that no one could escape while he looked for a way inside of the temple. With the temple locked down, there was absolutely no way for him to sneak into the temple itself. The temple's entrances were all guarded by Beskar-lined walls, hidden from the outside and under years of paint and cover-up details. The Jedi never wanted anyone to know about how defendable the Jedi Temple actually was, and it seemed to actually be working out. This would be a completely different scenario had Sindralic not had the deal with Oppo. Luckily for Sindralic, Order 66 was called when Oppo was inside the Jedi Temple, and a lot of Jedi were able to survive because of this. Sindralic watched as Anakin slowly lost his mind. The night began to get later and later. The clones picked up their dead and continued to try and find ways into the temple. Each attempt caused more and more casualties. The clones hadn't faced anything this deadly since Minban, Umbara, or Geonosis. The 501st was locked in Gridlock, and that was intended to push them away, but instead, it costed them more and more casualties and wounded, especially since their leader was becoming more impatient with the situation. Though when the temple wasn't emitting flames, Lord Sidious showed up to see what was happening. Realizing that the temple was ready for the assault, he decided he would relieve Anakin from his post, sending him to Mustafar to seal off another loose end. At the same time, the other clone legions on Coruscant would be put here to keep the Jedi locked inside. Sidious assumed that the temple had enough rations to survive a week or two. His intentions was to starve them out. He knew the Jedi would surrender for the sole purpose of ensuring the younglings' survival, and so he planned every single clone legion to be present on Coruscant to be in front of the Jedi Temple. Right now, it was just a Coruscant guard and the 501st, but that was enough clones to make sure that no Jedi tried to escape. One thing Sidious didn't realize is that the Jedi Temple was completely equipped to handle a situation like this. The Jedi Temple had enough rations for 10,000 members to last at least 3 months, and the truth of the matter is that there were only 6,000 Jedi inside of the temple. Yes, this means several thousands of Jedi could have been killed by Order 66, but most of the Order still survived, and Sindralic, as the night carried on, heard from more and more surviving Jedi Masters and Council members. So, the Jedi Temple had the chance to survive longer than 3 months, especially if they rationed their rations, which with 10,000 members would extend 3 months to 6 months. So the Jedi were looking at being able to survive for nearly a year. The question of orbital bombardment came into question, and while it certainly was a threat, the Jedi Temple went deep into the city, so the Jedi had plenty of room to escape. Even more than that was the collateral damage of an orbital bombardment and what it would do to the population. Palpatine couldn't risk the popularity, so that was most likely out of the question. Anakin went to visit his wife before going to Mustafar to kill the Separatist leaders. Anakin was on a mission. Surviving members of the Jedi Order would escape from their clone legions and find their ways back to Coruscant in secrecy. They all understood that the Jedi Temple was locked down, and there would be no way for them to get in. The best choice they had was to wait around under the city until they could do something productive. A few big-name Jedi around the city of Coruscant who returned were Depa Billaba and her apprentice Caleb Dume, Plo Koon, Obi Wan Kenobi, and Yoda. All 4 of them were council members. Shaak Ti and a couple of other council members were stuck inside the Jedi Temple at the moment. Yoda wanted to help those inside, but he knew they were safe, so his next alternative was taking the fight to the Sith Lord himself. Obi-Wan would be sent to find Anakin and stop him, considering Sindralic was able to inform Yoda of who was trying to kill the Jedi. As for Sidious, Yoda would take Plo and Depa with him, leaving Caleb Dume to stay hidden in the city. Obi-Wan would be surprised to find someone at Padme's residence when he arrived, looking for answers. It was the late afternoon when he arrived, and Obi-Wan found Ahsoka in the room. She was currently talking to Padme about what they were seeing on the news, about the siege of the Jedi Temple. Padme didn't know how to explain what Anakin said to her the previous night, but when Obi-Wan arrived, he was extremely relieved to find Ahsoka, and see that she was alright. He was incredibly worried about her, and the fact that she hadn't died during the Purge was an instant relief. The two of them embraced in a short hug, and then Obi-Wan asked if they'd seen Anakin. The two of them, especially Ahsoka, were confused. But Obi-Wan explained everything. Padme refused to believe it, but Ahsoka was slowly taking Obi-Wan's side. She understood her master very well, and understood that he wasn't well as the war slowly came to an end. Her master could never be this vile, though. But if he genuinely led the 501st against the Jedi Temple, then there was certainly an issue, and he needed to have some sense talked into him. Ahsoka and Obi-Wan were convinced they could bring him back to the light. There was no indication of how far he fell. The Jedi Temple wasn't littered with dead bodies of younglings, and they all assumed that when they went to Mustafar, he would be someone that they could talk some sense into. That would definitely not be the case, though. Anakin was full of rage. He slaughtered the Separatist leaders and then stood watching over the flames of Mustafar. While Anakin hadn't been able to break into the Jedi Temple, he was delirious with power, and he was even angrier because he couldn't break into the temple, which made him feel inferior. Anakin never liked to feel inferior, so with that, he vowed to grow in his power. After all, the goal of saving his wife from death was what he wanted. He couldn't imagine losing Padme, and he was doing anything he could to keep her alive, which in the end made him lose connection with himself. When Padme's shuttle arrived on Mustafar, Anakin was excited. But when he saw Ahsoka and Obi-Wan, his rage boiled. He convinced himself the Jedi had betrayed him, and now seeing Padme with Ahsoka and Obi-Wan, he believed that Padme allied herself with the Jedi, even assuming that Ahsoka allied herself with the Jedi as well. Anakin couldn't believe it. It was treachery. He was speaking about the most ridiculous concepts, his empire being one of the topics on his mind. He was clearly out of his mind, and he began to get angrier and angrier. Ahsoka and Obi-Wan noticed this, and they stepped in front of Padme to ensure she didn't get hurt, and Anakin's simple response was the ignition of his lightsaber. Obi-Wan and Ahsoka looked at each other as they pulled out their lightsabers and prepared to do something they didn't want to do. They would have to take the fight to Anakin, to try at least subdue him. Obi-Wan was extremely worried about Ahsoka. He knew he would be able to hold his own against the impatience of Skywalker, but he wasn't sure if Ahsoka was ready for that or not. On the other side of the galaxy, Yoda, Deppa, and Plo walked into the Palpatine's office. The Sith Lord was clearly upset. 3 Jedi Masters and the High Council survived, and all 3 of them were not ones Palpatine would have liked to fight. Yoda was a Grand Master of the Order. Deppa was a student of Mace Windu and the prodigy to his power, and then Plo Koon, the Kel Dor who challenged the likes of even Yoda. Sidious was in a fight-or-flight mood, so he ignited his lightsaber and leapt over his desk. Masameda was in terror. There was no room for him to escape. Not that the Jedi would just execute him for no reason, but still fearful. The Jedi moved around and then confronted the Sith Lord, each of them drawing their lightsabers looking at Sidious, ready to take him down. He was the greatest threat in the galaxy. If he was killed, there was a chance to save the Republic. Sidious lunged across the room and drove his blade forward. Plo sidestepped and blocked it away from him as Yoda leapt through the air. Sidious hissed as he dragged his blade around. Deppa, on the other hand, danced around Sidious as he stumbled back in caution. Surrounded by 3 Jedi Masters, Sidious looked around at each one of them trying to find who was the weakest. If only his second lightsaber hadn't fallen out of the window earlier. Sidious swung at Deppa before doubling back and jabbing at Yoda. Plo slid under Sidious's strike and parried with the Sith Lord, as Sidious used the Force to throw Yoda through a wall adjacent to him. Deppa moved on the offense, just as her master had the previous night. Plo followed her as Sidious pedaled back and parried every strike before using the Senate Pod to give himself momentum to jump forward. He slashed down at Deppa as she blocked and then used her hand to throw Sidious onto his desk. Yoda climbed out of the wall and joined Plo and Deppa as they looked at the Sith Lord try to recover. On Mustafar, Ahsoka leaned back as she dodged a strike by Anakin. Obi-Wan was doing everything he could to keep Ahsoka safe. It was throwing him off of his game. His worry for Ahsoka made him weak. The 3 of them had carried on their duel from the landing platform into the main conflicts. Their blades cut into the walls into smithereens. Anakin's aggressive push made Ahsoka rely on the lack thereof training that revolved around defense with a lightsaber and lightsaber combat. She was really relying on Obi-Wan. Ahsoka's aggressive style helped balance out Anakin's overly aggressive assault, but it didn't mean he wasn't currently in control of the battle. Anakin pushed heavily on Obi-Wan as he turned around mid-assault and lifted his hand and caught Ahsoka in midair as he threw her across the room as she slammed into the wall. Ahsoka cried out in agony. Something cracked in her back when she hit the wall, and she was down. Obi-Wan noted that she was out of the battle, so he focused on his part. Anakin and him pushed back into the control room, while Ahsoka lay in the hallway. She tried to get back up, but the sounds of lightsabers were getting further and further away from her. She slowly got to her feet as she felt the weakness in her back. One of the discs had clearly shattered in her lower back. almost completely stunting any movement she could make, but she couldn't let Obi-Wan die. She didn't realize he was doing alright. Obi-Wan, on the other hand, was holding his own. He at this point was focusing on playing the long game. With Ahsoka out of the fight, he just had to wait until the opportune moment, and then from there, he'd be able to strike Anakin and win this battle. Obi-Wan held his own, and then he was distracted when he felt Ahsoka's presence get closer and closer. Obi-Wan couldn't see her over the flashing blades in front of him. He just hoped that she landed the right strike. Obi-Wan stepped back, blocking everything that came his way. Anakin paused from his assault, and then he shoved Obi-Wan with all of his strength, pushing Obi-Wan off balance into the wall behind him, as he whipped his blade around and stuck his hand out as far as he could, leading the lightsaber straight into Ahsoka's chest as she looked at Anakin with surprise. Obi-Wan looked up as he watched Ahsoka fall off of Anakin's lightsaber, almost lifelessly. Obi-Wan felt rage, but he closed his eyes and used balance and peace as he stepped forward with a stiff momentum. Anakin turned around and moved to block, but his hand was thrown away from blocking the strike that Kenobi made, as Obi-Wan dragged his lightsaber across Anakin's chest. Anakin was instantaneously killed as he fell back to the ground lifelessly. Obi-Wan pulled Anakin's lightsaber with the Force and threw it across the room, not even checking to see if he killed Anakin. Obi-Wan slid across the floor in a panic as he picked up Ahsoka and laid her head on his lap. He asked if she was okay. She looked at him with a weak cough. Obi-Wan grabbed a hold of her hand and asked her to focus on him. Ahsoka's eyes got blurrier, and she looked at Obi-Wan. She was so sorry for everything. Obi-Wan told her that there was nothing to apologize for. She told him that she had the chance to talk to Anakin to give him a message. Obi-Wan shushed her, and told her that it was in the past. It was over. There was no reason to dwell on it, let alone let it ruin the present. Everything would be okay. Obi-Wan wanted her to know that. Ahsoka admitted she was scared. Obi-Wan knew that there was nothing he could do, but he told her to never fear, because he'd always be right here with her. He wasn't going to go anywhere. Ahsoka looked at Obi-Wan as she smiled a little weakly, and then the blur of her eyes disappeared, as her tight grip on Obi-Wan's hand loosened and she died in his arms, just like Qui-Gon and just like Satine. Obi-Wan heard the door open as he placed Ahsoka down gently and jumped up. He knew who it was. He ran over to the door to stop Padme. Obi-Wan got to the door, and Padme looked around and asked what happened. Obi-Wan shook his head as he tried to guide her out of the room. Padme realized what this meant as her sadness took over. She let out a cry of no as she tried to shove and push Obi-Wan out of the way. Obi-Wan didn't want her to see this, as he opened his arms to keep her away from Ahsoka and Anakin's bodies. Luckily, they were hidden behind some of the tables in the room, so Padme couldn't see anything. Obi-Wan slowly started putting his arms around Padme after her hitting and aggressive behavior turned into weakness, pleas, and sadness. She couldn't believe it. She didn't want to. Obi-Wan didn't either. He tried to express that no matter what happened here, everything would turn out okay. Padme's sadness turned into a faint beat of life. She buried her face into Obi-Wan as he gave her a somber hug, trying to get her out of the room where her husband killed her friend and her other friend killed her husband. It was a true travesty, and Padme couldn't bear it. On the other side of the galaxy, Palpatine got up from his desk as he felt the essence of Vader disappear. He knew Vader was dead, and he was the last Sith Lord. He shot lightning at the Jedi as he lunged at them. Depa and Plo backed up as they blocked the lightning. Yoda got into the middle as Depa and Plo moved around the sides as Palpatine was surrounded from all three sides. He tried to fight off the Jedi, but he was outnumbered to do anything. His blade hit everyone else's blade, but he couldn't do more than that. He was a terrific duelist, but this was too much. Mas Amedda watched the most powerful man in the galaxy slowly lose his power before being expunged by Depa, whose blade cut through Sidious's thigh before Yoda drove his blade through Sidious's back. The two blows to the Sith Lord killed him instantaneously. The three Jedi looked at Mas Amedda and told him that Sidious was behind everything. He knew that, of course, but then the Jedi just left. Padme would be taken to her ship as R2 and C-3PO readied it off for takeoff. And Obi-Wan buried Ahsoka and Anakin in the lava rivers. He also kept their lightsabers as he believed that maybe Padme would like to keep them to remember them by them. They would return to Coruscant where Luke and Leia would be born to a mother who was able to give a healthy birth. No issues or complications. Obi-Wan would vow to Padme that he would support her and her children through this. Padme would of course be very appreciative, but the biggest question was the Empire or the Republic or whatever the hell it was called at this point. Mas Amedda blamed the death of the Emperor on the Jedi, but because the entire galaxy knew the Jedi were currently barricaded inside the Jedi Temple, it seemed like a lie. Everyone saw the images of star cruisers surrounding the Jedi Temple with thousands of clones prepared to break down the doors. There was absolutely no way this could be true, let alone that not long after, Padme would come forward with evidence of Palpatine's crimes. All of her hard-pressed evidence would lead the Senate falling back into a democratic process, which would bring Padme to become the newest Chancellor of what would become the Republic. Order 66 would be revoked and the Clone Wars would come to an end. The Jedi would return to almost normalcy, though it would take a couple of months to go through this legislation, because democratic processes take time, and victory was achieved for everyone. Maul would be locked away and Obi-Wan would be offered the role of Master of the Order. But he would deny it and leave the order to raise Luke and Leia, so that one day he could tell them stories about the Anakin Skywalker, that it was his brother, that was his student, and that was his best friend. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is our story. Again, special thanks to Benjamin Wells, Jonathan, Pimp Daddy Bane, Icy Raptor, Apollo Madman Studios, Anakin003, and Gore for supporting the channel. If you want to see a what if, let me know below. We've got comments, we'll do crossovers. Check out the Twitch, the community Discord, and the Patreon, supporting in other ways. The next video is going to be Yoda Part 3 or something else. Don't know yet. If you want, yeah, we already did that. So for the giveaway, go down below. Don't pay attention to the scammer. That's not me. I only give away videos where you can see my face. I've done it before, so for long-time viewers, you have seen me before. That's how I did my giveaways. Giveaway ends when I hit 50,000 subscribers. 3 lights are getting away. Go down below, hit the dock, go on the dock, write your name on the dock. Da-da-da-da-da. That's it. Simple. Anyways, let's talk about our story. Our story, well, I know people are gonna, I'm already seeing the comment section. Why'd you kill Ahsoka? She's not beating Anakin. It's just not happening. He's seriously, like, it's not happening. She's good. She's great. We love her, but she's not beating Anakin. It's just not happening, even with Obi-Wan there. And that's the point I'm trying to convey there. It's not me hating on Ahsoka. I've gotten that before. People think I hate Ahsoka. I really don't. She's a great character. But I have to be honest with her limitations, and her limitations come to beating Anakin. She's not beating Anakin. It's something that's not going to happen. Anakin is too vile on Mustafar, and that's something I'm trying to show here. Now, we did another video similar to this before, and that's where I'm getting a lot of the, I've already seen these comments before, but the truth is Ahsoka is not beating Anakin. And I almost had Obi-Wan die because of that too, because Obi-Wan would be very concerned for Ahsoka. He's just skilled enough, because he's a master of defense, to defend himself. Ahsoka is aggressive in her lightsaber combat, and she's a great duelist. I mean, she's survived 2 encounters with literally General Grievous. But Anakin is a little bit of a different beast, especially on Mustafar. He is angry, he's impatient, and he doesn't really care. And that's something I try to highlight with the dialogue that I use. As for everything else that changes, I thought it was actually a really fun changing up the whole dynamic of what happens before Order 66, because Ahsoka being back on Coruscant earlier than the episodes in the Clone Wars allows Maul to be taken to the Jedi Temple. So Maul just gets put away forever. But saying that they get there, say, that night, and it's because like, oh, well, I can't go visit Anakin, so I'll just go and get a room, and I'll go get a room for a night, and then I'll come back and visit him in the morning, because nothing's gonna happen, right? That's kind of the consensus. It's like, nothing's gonna happen. Everyone's like, oh, the war's gonna end. Obi-Wan killed Grievous. The war's gonna end. You know, Dooku's dead, Grievous is dead. It looks perfect. Everything looks like it's gonna go swimmingly for the Republic, and that's just not what happens. And, you know, yeah, so I hope you all enjoyed this. Travesty for Ahsoka fans, but it is what it is. I play no favorites. Anyways, I love you all, spread the love, and always remember, my friends, may the Force be with you.